What's going on, everybody? RJ Ochoa here from SB Nation's bloggingtheboys.com. Hope all is well wherever you are. We hope you're happy, safe, healthy, and that you enjoyed your 4th of July weekend. With the 4th of July in the rearview mirror, that means one special thing. The Dallas Cowboys training camp is close. We are just a couple of weeks away from things getting going out in Oxnard, California on the left coast. And when they do, there's a whole lot that we are going to be paying attention to. And to get ready for it, we are continuing our training camp preview series here on the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel. Make sure you do subscribe, by the way. And today, my friends, we are talking about the Dallas Cowboys backfield. That's right. Whether you think running backs do or don't matter, obviously the backfield is a component to an NFL roster, which means we have to address it. But we're excited to address it because this backfield, while it was frustrating last season, brings with it in 2021 a lot of hope, a lot of potential promise, and certainly a lot of opportunity. The Dallas Cowboys, obviously, in terms of their backfield, have basically been a one-man show for the last 5 years now since they drafted Ezekiel Elliott with the 4th overall pick. There have been a number of different players who have spelled him in different capacities: Lance Dunbar, Alfred Morris, and now notably Tony Pollard, who is entering his 3rd season with the Dallas Cowboys after being drafted in 2019. And I know there are a lot of people who want to see Tony Pollard utilized more, utilized differently, which is something we can certainly get to. It's something we are going to get to here today in this video. But before we do, let's kind of lay all our cards out on the table and take a look at what the Dallas Cowboys are working with when it comes to their backfield entering training camp. Now, the Dallas Cowboys roster at running back, again, Zeke and Tony Pollard are the main names and obviously the primary points of interest. And for what it's worth, this list, we will remind you, is listed alphabetically. Nobody freak out. But in terms of all players on the Cowboys roster running back, they also have Rico Dowdle, they have Jaquan Hardy, and they do have Brendan Knox. Now, the Cowboys have rolled without a fullback before. You will recall in 2018, they actually decided not to have a fullback. And obviously last year, Jameis Olawale, part of the opt-outs, one of the opt-outs for the Dallas Cowboys. But the Cowboys do have 2 fullbacks on their roster at the moment: Siwo Onilinua and Nick Ralston. So they do have some options. We will talk about Siwo in just a little bit. But again, to kind of set the table for where the Cowboys backfield is in 2021, we unfortunately have to take a look at 2020. And obviously there wasn't a lot of great stuff to happen to the Cowboys backfield last year. Zeke Elliott had a number of career lows, which says a lot really about the career that he'd been having to that point. Last season was difficult for Zeke. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it wasn't, but Zeke Elliott's career prior to 2020 was really so glowing that anything that was almost average looked pedestrian because he'd been that elite, if that makes sense. Again, Zeke had a really rough season last year. The fumbles cannot continue. Nobody's here to tell you anything other than that. But the point is that we have to keep the proper and full perspective and context, which is what we're trying to do here. But beyond Zeke, because the backfield obviously is a dependent position to a certain degree, which is why it is a befuddling thing for NFL teams like the Dallas Cowboys to hand out a big-time contract back there. But that's a whole different thing. We're not here to pick at old wounds. The Cowboys' offensive line was decimated last year. You know that, and I know that. Tyron Smith obviously missed most of the season. Lyle Collins missed all of the season. Zach Martin was in and out. Tyler Biadasz got hurt for different points. I mean, Dak Prescott got hurt. When you look at Zeke Elliott, if I've said this before, if we power ranked all 11 starters for the Cowboys, if we assume they're starting at 11 personnel, if we power ranked every player, every starter's importance to the offense as an overall functioning mechanism, the running back, whoever it is like 9th or 10th on that list. And so the running back being so dependent on other positions, when you're starting left tackle, you're starting right tackle, you're starting right guard, you're starting center, and most importantly to everything, you're starting quarterback all go down, things are going to be very different for the running back, and in this case, Zeke Elliott. And so while that is true and was true for Zeke Elliott, it also was equally true for Tony Pollard, who was definitely more efficient down the stretch of the season, which leads to the idea that maybe Tony Pollard, who did average 4.3 yards per attempt last season, should be incorporated and involved more in the Cowboys offense here in 2021. And this is I don't know if it's a point of dissension or a point of discussion for Dallas Cowboys fans, but obviously there's a lot of people who love Zeke. And obviously Zeke Elliott has been a really fantastic running back, a really fantastic player for the Cowboys for 5 years now, has led the NFL in rushing twice, has been a big reason why they were playoff teams in each of those seasons. And so it makes sense to assume that Zeke Elliott can potentially get back to that form. All the reports about him to this point are that he is in fantastic shape, and that is certainly great to see. In fact, on the notion that Zeke Elliott is in fantastic shape, let's take a look at what Jonah Javad had to offer in terms of his coverage of Zeke Elliott's training camp regimen so far. Optimistic, right? I mean, like Zeke Elliott certainly looks good. Nobody's out here trying to say he looks washed or he looks terrible or anything like that. He looks like he is in prime shape. Is a I don't want to say a stretch, but it's hard to tell. And ultimately, he looks like he's in the proper shape leading into training camp. But hey, what Zeke feels, what Zeke says, is certainly noteworthy. So again, we go to Jonah Javad's coverage of Zeke Elliott to hear exactly where the running back is right now.
Where do you feel like you're at in shape this offseason compared to years past because of the work you've been doing with him?
I think I'm definitely in a good spot right now. One of the things that that I really love about working with Jay is his running style is a lot different than mine. I take a lot of big steps. I got a long stride, and he's a different body type, and he has a different running technique. He's more shifty, more elusive, in and out very quick. In a phone booth, and that's something I want to add to my game, and I think he's definitely helped me develop some of those skills this offseason, and I think I've gotten better.
At this point, I think it's fair to be cautiously optimistic about Zeke Elliott. Again, nobody's ready to jump, to an extraordinary conclusion here, but Zeke Elliott is working. And I want to bring up something that a friend of mine, Rob Stats Guerrera, I do co-host a show with him every week on the SB Nation NFL show called The Look Ahead. Stats is a 49ers fan, so you have to, kind of take what he says with a grain of salt. But he actually made me realize something. Zeke Elliott generally has his best seasons when he has a full offseason and a full training camp. And when you think about it, in 2016, obviously Zeke Elliott had a full offseason, full training camp as an incoming rookie into the NFL after the Cowboys did draft him number 4 overall. In 2017, there were all the discussions and everything surrounding Zeke Elliott in terms of off the field. Will he be suspended? Won't he be suspended? Obviously, that impacted a lot of things within the Cowboys overall, it really seemed. And that was not a great season for Zeke Elliott, although he did almost hit 1,000 yards despite playing only 10 games that season. 2018 coming off of that, again, another full offseason, another full workload, another full training camp experience for Zeke Elliott. Leads the NFL in rushing yet again, not as productive of a year as his rookie season, but still the point being that a full catalog, full complement of offseason work generally ends with Zeke Elliott having a great year. And then you get to 2019, which is kind of when the break point really happened in his career. Not a full offseason because Zeke Elliott, as we all know, held out of training camp. What happened? Not a great year, a down year for Zeke Elliott. When you look at 2020, this is true for the entire world, obviously, but not a full year, not a normal year, obviously dealing with all the COVID restrictions. And so Zeke Elliott put together his worst season to date in his NFL career. It is worth mentioning that Zeke Elliott has seen some regression over the course of his career, all 5 seasons, when it comes to yards per game. That's not a completely indicative stat, but it is a downward trajectory that he is on. And I do think it bounces back because it was so low last season, but still, the fact is that he has touched the ball an inordinate amount of times through 5 seasons of work in the NFL, and that wears and tears. I mean, that wears and tears on anybody. And Zeke Elliott, as strong and as magnificent as he is, ultimately, maybe one day will show some signs of that, maybe was showing some signs of that. But perhaps, again, a full offseason, full workload, full training camp is going to spell something differently. Let's take a look at why we are optimistic about the Cowboys backfield in 2021. And it does start with Zeke Elliott, obviously, having that full campaign that we talked about here. There are, points of data to suggest that that is a positive thing for him and his individual performance. And generally speaking, when Zeke Elliott does well, the Cowboys do. The 2 seasons that he has led the NFL in rushing, again, the Cowboys have won division titles and made it to the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. What's more is Tony Pollard now represents a different option for the Cowboys. And depending on how you feel about this, that is a very good thing because, look, the Cowboys obviously are devoted to Zeke Elliott. He has his contract, etc. You always have to follow the money in the NFL. But Tony Pollard is a very interesting player, somebody who I think we all trust offensive coordinator Kellen Moore to work with. Mike McCarthy has spoken glowingly of Tony Pollard, and he did get some opportunities last year as well that are notable and definitely fed him well. No pun intended on the feeding thing because the whole Zeke thing, but fed him well in terms of earning NFL opportunities and NFL experience to prepare him for more opportunities of those kind in the future. But another point of optimism, we mentioned Siwo. I do think that is a really interesting kind of subplot. I don't necessarily think he'll the reality is that when you're talking about this Cowboys offense, there's so many players, so many mouths to feed, so many guys that we are optimistic about, right? You talking about 11 personnel, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, Blake Jarwin, Dalton Schultz. Now we're out of 11 personnel. You've got Zeke Elliott. I mean, You've got Cedric Wilson. You've got maybe Simi Fehoko. I mean, there are so many places to go with the ball that it's difficult to imagine an inordinate amount of opportunities for Siwo, but he does give you a different perspective, a different option nonetheless in the backfield if he does ultimately become a part of this roster, which I think is something we're all rooting for. So let's take a look at Zeke specifically, because this is a discussion about the Cowboys backfield, but as mentioned, this is kind of the Zeke Elliott show. When we take a look at him in 2020, I mean, it was rough. Career lows for him in terms of overall rushing yards, in terms of yards per game. I mentioned that has been on a downward trajectory all throughout his entire career. All 5 seasons, every year it has gone down. But again, that speaks more to, I think, the incredible success he had early on in his NFL career. I mean, we're talking about this season for Zeke Elliott where he did average 4 yards per carry, but again, a career low. I mean, if you look at these numbers, the 65 yards per game is difficult to look at. I get that. And it's worth mentioning he only played 15 games. However, Zeke Elliott has only played 15 games and led the NFL in rushing, which again, when you compare him to past versions of himself, that's where it really gets tough for Zeke. But the 2 worst years of Zeke Elliott's career have been seasons in which he came just shy of rushing for 1,000 yards. Now, I'm not trying to say that 1,000 yards is this sort of point line in the sand where he crosses that and everything is sunshiny and perfect and happiness is all over the place, but that is a respectable season in a vacuum for a running back to rush for 1,000 yards. So you're talking about Zeke Elliott coming 21 yards shy, no pun intended there. But 21, right? Just doing the math here, just making sure I'm good here. I mean, it's a bad year for Zeke. And what's important about this is the fumbles. The fumbles is what makes last year so difficult to take for Zeke Elliott, because if you've got these numbers, just this particular volume without the fumbles, I think it's better. It's more manageable, more digestible. But the fact that Zeke Elliott turned the ball over so much in times of serious consequence for the Dallas Cowboys really was what made last season so difficult for him. The spotlight is on him. That's another thing too, is, early on in his NFL career, there was all this kind of hype and all this newness to it. But now you also have to consider, I think, that football fans like you, football fans like all of you really, are so smart, right? And football fans are so hip and they're so privy to the way that the NFL works because they study so much, they read so much. I know you're reading Blogging the Boys, bloggingtheboys.com. By the way, you're home for the best Dallas Cowboys coverage in the world. But so when you factor that in, football fans are smart and they can't be bamboozled, right? And so when Stephen Jones comes out and talks about how Zeke Elliott's the straw that stirs the drink. Last year, when he came out and said that there were lots of analytics to support that paying a certain player a certain percentage or more of your salary cap inhibits your opportunities of winning, things like that. When you say things like that, football fans nowadays are not going to take that because they're too smart for that, for lack of a more proper way to put it. And so when you pay a running back like Zeke Elliott, these really smart, really intellectual football fans like yourself, really smart and beautiful, if I'm being honest with you, they are not going to take it. They're going to be upset, and they're going to use that as, material for determining how they feel about certain things, right? Like that's just life, is reacting to different things. And so what works against Zeke, when you look at last season in 2020, besides the fact that he had all the fumbles that we talked about that are such a negative thing, is Dak Prescott goes down. And obviously your offensive line goes down, but you pay Zeke Elliott. And at the time, Dak Prescott did not have his long-term extension with the Cowboys, but you paid Zeke Elliott, Cowboys. So he should be a player that should elevate everybody else in spite of whatever, craziness is going on around him. And that was not the case. Last season really proved to a certain degree, in fact, almost to a full degree, how dependent Zeke Elliott can be on different factors. Now, he's still a very special player in and of his own right, but that's just the reality of the running back position. And so in a lot of senses, my whole point here is that Zeke Elliott has a lot of narrative working against him in the eyes of a lot of Cowboys fans because he has the big time contract, because people love to talk about how running backs don't matter. Zeke Elliott can't put together a season like this even without the fumbles, because when you get that contract, people are expecting something so Herculean that is unattainable. It's difficult for any running back to match what a running back contract like Zeke Elliott got is totally worth in their minds. And so that's a difficult hurdle that he's always fighting, although Zeke Elliott, if anybody, is definitely good at hurdling different things. So he certainly seems fit to overcome that. But needless to say, Zeke Elliott is I think very primed to have a bounce back season in 2021, mostly because it's really difficult to imagine how he could have a season worse than this. And that, again, I know that this sounds harsh, but this really speaks to how incredible his career has been so far, that we are being harsh, that we are being critical of Zeke Elliott based off of a season in which he almost ran for 1,000 yards. That's the glowy part of last season for Zeke Elliott. Again, the fumbles, the turnovers, those have got to stop. And if the training that he's going through really is working the way he says it is, then I think we all have reasons to be optimistic. But again, another thing that represents optimism, represents hope for the Cowboys backfield as a whole in 2021, we got to give him some love here today, is Tony Pollard. And when you look at the career balance that Tony Pollard has experienced with Zeke Elliott, albeit a small sample size, it does suggest that maybe Tony Pollard will be involved more here in 2021. When you look at overall offensive snaps taken by each player in 2019, Tony Pollard's rookie year, lion's share went to Ezekiel Elliott, almost 84%. 84 if you want to round up. My math is sharp today. No big deal. But Tony Pollard, only 18% of offensive snaps taken, again, as a rookie in the National Football League. Now, last season, again, we have to apply and, inject the context that Zeke Elliott did miss time last season. He did miss a game. Last season in 2020, Ezekiel Elliott was inactive for the first time in his NFL career when the Cowboys hosted the San Francisco 49ers late in the season. So that does factor in. That's certainly a worthwhile thing to mention. But last season as a whole, on paper, when you look at it, look back on it, Zeke Elliott only had 69, percent of the offensive snaps for the Cowboys, while Tony Pollard jumped up to 32%, again, if you do round up. So maybe we do see a true 60-40 split. And I think that there's logic to that, right? There's general logic to that, as, man, Zeke Elliott has a lot of wear and tear on his body because he's taken so many touches. He's had so many carries so far in his NFL career that if we do kind of mitigate that by utilizing Tony Pollard more, that helps in a lot of senses, because not only does it help kind of keep Zeke Elliott fresh longer and further throughout the season, further throughout different games, right? But it also incorporates a player who's extremely dynamic in Tony Pollard, because Tony Pollard is incredible. Tony Pollard had a number, of reasons why the Cowboys should be playing him last season, and he really justified them when he did get on the field. I'm not trying to say that Tony Pollard immediately had a large impact, because the things Tony Pollard did aren't necessarily massively separating himself from Ezekiel Elliott, but he does have an ability to separate from defenders, which is something that Zeke Elliott has never been really great at. Zeke Elliott is such a fantastic running back and great at running people over and going around and going over and going through people. But Tony Pollard has that speed element to his game. He can separate. He can put distance between himself and defenders. And that's another tool that Kellen Moore can certainly work with, something I think we all want to see him work with and want to see him incorporate into this offense as a whole. And so Tony Pollard, if we have to hope for a percentage kind of split here, if we're looking at these numbers from last season and saying what would be an ideal usage of Zeke and Tony Pollard out of the Cowboys backfield in 2021, first of all, throw the ball. That's the very first thing that we feel. But second of all, when you do kind of divvy this up in a general sense, because it is so contingent upon situations and what's going on in any given game, any given week. But again, speaking generally here, I do think that 60-40 is kind of the sweet spot that you want to live at. Maybe 65-35, kind of what we saw last season, because again, this workload last season for Zeke still did yield almost 1,000 yards, albeit with all the turnovers along the way. So 60-40 for Tony Pollard, Zeke Elliott, or rather Zeke Elliott and Tony Pollard. I think that's an honest day's work for the Cowboys in 2021. And so if that's ultimately what ends up happening, I do think with the other full complement of offensive weapons that this team has, that, that's, if you're making a recipe and if you and I are in the kitchen and I say, let's go 60-40 Zeke Tony, I mean, that's like adding, more butter to the mix, right? Like anything you're cooking, if you add more butter, it's not a bad thing. And that's what I'm saying. That analogy really failed, and I really thought it was going to work. But the whole point is that if we kind of design that in our minds, if that's kind of the expectation going into this season, and if they're right around there, it doesn't have to be 60-40, even if it's, again, 65-35, 70-30, I think that's a proper, the right balance. And I think that that's the important thing, is finding that balance for the Cowboys. And that obviously task falls on the coaching staff, because at this point in Zeke Elliott's career, with the number of touches that he has, it's not about Zeke not being able or being capable as an NFL player. It's simply wise to utilize other great players and to rest players who play positions where they do experience an inordinate amount of wear and tear. And so if you can find that right balance, I do think it would further amplify what the Cowboys backfield is able to do, which is a really exciting thing. So training camp on the way, a couple of weeks away. We're very excited about that. Very excited for what's to come. I'll be out there the final week of July. If you're going to be out there, let me know. You can tweet me. You can send me a DM. My DMs are open on Twitter or Instagram at RJ Ochoa. You can also shoot me an email, rj.ochoa@sbnation.com, if that is more your speed. Make sure you do check out bloggingtheboys.com for the latest and greatest in the world of Dallas Cowboys news. We are constantly refreshing the website to make sure you are up to date on all things America's team. Make sure you also subscribe to the Blogging the Boys podcast network. We have a new episode that comes out every single day. On Tuesday's episode of the 750, Tony Casillas and I spoke about how different people become Dallas Cowboys fans, which was a very fun conversation to have, especially with somebody who played for the Dallas Cowboys and won 2 Super Bowls with them. We are available on all major podcast platforms. If you can, leave a rating, write a review. Those things mean a lot to us. And please subscribe here to the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel. We love putting together these videos. And believe me when I say, we know and we take it very seriously that it is our job to provide the best Dallas Cowboys coverage, discussion, insight that we can to you, because we love the Cowboys. You love the Cowboys, and we want to love them and experience them and celebrate them together. And so we're honored that you devote any part of your Cowboys fandom to us. It really does mean a lot to us. We work very hard to make sure that we give you the best product possible. So subscribe to the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel. That makes us very happy. And let's see what else. Have a great day. Have the best day ever. Just seriously, have the best day ever. You know why? Because you deserve it. Thanks for joining us, everybody. See you next time.